live here in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Your coat and you launched a little gold button, it'll be on the register book stand there.
We gather this morning in remembrance and in celebration of the significance of the journey of life, with all the memories of Dr. Joseph Mayo and how he has shared in the journey of your life as father, as brother, as family member, as grandfather, as friend. We want to be able to share in some of those memories. As Carl said, for those who perhaps have just arrived, we ask that all cell phones be turned off or silenced so that we might focus on these moments, and to be able to plan for the time of sharing, in which we're going to invite any who would like to perhaps share a moment of a memory, whether standing up there or coming up here. I'd also like, on behalf of the family, but also myself, to express thanks for you being here. In a time in which we are losing, I think, some of the integrity of the value of human life, you are here today to say that the life of Dr. Joseph Mayo Jr. has had so much value and significance for you that you have taken time out of your schedule, out of your busy life, to be able to be here now. And for that, I both commend you and give you thanks. And in so doing, I wish I could explain or answer why things happen the way they do. That I could be able to express some logic that would go along with the challenges of life, with the issues of life, with the seeming unfairness at times of life. And even though God never said life would be fair or just, we would like to have some equity or some understanding, and yet I don't have those answers. I wish I did, but I don't. All I know is that there is a loving and a compassionate God who seeks to shepherd us even as we walk through the darkest valley. In the psalm it says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, or the valley of the shadow of death, I will be with you. And it is that comfort that sustains us sometimes during those most difficult and tragic of times. We hear from the words of the scriptures where God speaks his mind. He's able to express that which is on his mind. He says at that point that God is our refuge and strength, a present help in trouble. And I want to point out just a couple words on that before we go further. And one of them is that God is a refuge. We all need a safe place to go somehow. Some place to go where we know it's okay, we're going to be safe, that it's going to be quiet and serene and we're at peace. We all need those places, but we can't live there. We have to face the harsh realities of this life, and the response is that he is our strength, an ever-present help in trouble, the very presence, even though often we don't recognize it or realize it. He concludes, therefore, we will not fear, even though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with its surging. For there is a river whose stream shall make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells, and God is within and will help. For nations are in uproar, kingdoms are falling, but God lifts his voice, and the earth melts. For the Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. He goes on to remind us that the eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath, capture the image, are his everlasting arms. For he heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. And as I thought about that scripture this morning, I thought how often your father had healed and helped and ministered to those who were hurting, and held them in that regard, upheld them in his arms. Let's take a moment together and pray. Our eternal God, we come to you not with answers, often with more questions, but with an awareness that you've said that you are a shepherd God, and that you desire to help us both in that personal connection, but also in other people that surround us with the support and encouragement and help that comes. We thank you that today there are those here, as well as countless others, who are remembering and are thankful that Dr. Joseph Mayo has lived. We ask your comfort and care in this as well as in the future, in the name of Jesus. Amen. Several years ago, I received a letter from Billy Graham. It was from his association, and he was writing about the passing of his dear wife, Ruth Bell Graham. Ruth Bell Graham was a noted writer and speaker and poet in her own right. And as she and her husband, Billy Graham, the noted evangelist, were traveling along an interstate, she happened to see a sign. And she pointed to that sign and said, "That is what I want on my tombstone." Well, today, if you were to go down to North Carolina where she was laid to rest, you'd find things exactly as she had requested. It has her name, Ruth Bell Graham, her birth date, her death date, and then the words that she had seen on that interstate so many years before. Those words are Ruth Bell Graham, birth date, death date, end of construction. Thank you for your patience. And I thought how very fitting those words truly are for the journey of our lives. We all have a time of beginning, a time in which life captures that which is happening in the journey that we have. And whether we like it or not, there will be a point at which our lives will end. The journey will cease. But what's significant, even as Ruth Bell Graham noted, was that which happens between the birth and the death is what establishes the legacy and the significance of the journey of life. And it is that with which we gather today with a confidence that even in these moments, with the seeming unjustness of passing at such a young age, that somehow the significance of the journey is truly found not in the length of years, but rather in the investment of the memories that are in your lives and the lessons that have been learned and the images that have been taught through the years of sharing. Some of that is captured in the memories that are in the snapshots of our lives, in our minds. Some of it's noted here in these pictures as you walked in here behind me and over on the other side. Images from our earliest childhood on through the journey of life with family and friends. All the memories that combine together to create that which is a legacy for living. And in that living and in that legacy, to understand what Jesus was trying to help us understand, to love God, love neighbor as self. And in that loving neighbor as self, we find the true legacy that we are willing to share and create each day. The memories for family and friends as they have shared in that journey. Certainly for 3 children, a part of his living legacy. Of Chelsea and her fiancé Nicholas, his sons Stephen and David, and the memories that you have of life here in Jackson, in Florida, wherever the journey took you to be able to share that legacy. Whether in times together in joyous moments or whether on phone calls as you've shared with each other. In times of laughter and times of difficulty and sorrow. It's all a part of that legacy of the memory pictures that are snapshots in the journey of life. And then grandchildren. As a grandfather, I can attest, even as I'm sure your father did, that while loving children very, very much, there's nothing quite like grandchildren. And somehow grandchildren get the benefit of the extra devotion and special attention that allows a little more latitude and a little more freedom and enjoyment, as I saw the pictures earlier of by the water's edge with one of the grandchildren. And the memories shared with Braylon and Olivia of their grampy. The memories that have been shared with the mother of his children, Stephanie. And then the memories of sister Joan. And those are unique and special memories as well. And I've always valued listening to the stories of brothers and sisters talking about their sibling, because they know things about that individual that often, well, parents don't even know. And sometimes that's pretty good and safe that way. And so those memories become endearing and need to be told as well. Memories of nieces, Erin and Brianne, Kristen and Jody, Chloe and Lauren and Mallory, and nephews Nicholas, Nathan, and Noah, and numerous cousins, as well as many friends, but especially best friends Jerry and John and Frank and Michael, Brad and Jean. Oh, and I did forget, there was one other child, the child Tink. That's a very special child. Perhaps sometimes you felt got a little more attention than even the 3 of you. I'm not sure how that. But dear memories of that. So many, preceded in passing by his parents as well, Joseph and Irene. Our lives really are a journey that is significant in the investment that we make with one another. And today we celebrate the journey of a life which began in Dearborn, Michigan on November 19, 1954. A graduate of Dearborn High School, and he graduated from University of Michigan and the National College of Chiropractic in Lombard, Illinois. He held the practice, and many of you may be here not only as family and friends, but perhaps as patients whom he cared for and helped to get through the journeys of life as well. He performed, it's described, over 400,000 adjustments and seen over 9,000 new patients. 9,000 lives impacted by his presence. So many patients that through the years, the demonstration of that appreciation came at his retirement when they came thanking him, the gratitude for someone who cared, someone who listened, and someone who ministered. But those are just a portion of a few memories captured in words, but also in pictures. But perhaps there are pictures or thoughts of your mind that you would like to share in the journey as well. And we'd like to invite you to come and do that. Would you like to start for us, you think?
My dad knew how much I hated public speaking, so he's getting a kick out of this right now. I'm reading a letter that my dad's friend, Jean Haskett, sent me. Although the Haskett family cannot be present today, they've asked me to share some of their laugh-out-loud memories of their dear friend, Joe Mayo. Joe loved his children, Chelsea, Stephen, and David, as well as the U of M football team. We enjoyed our annual trips to northern Michigan with our families and our numerous trips to Carmel, California, and golf at Pebble Beach. Joe was a pretty good golfer, always carrying a handicap of 9 to 10. He would easily have been a much lower handicap golfer if he could read greens. Many times I would stop him and ask, "Where do you think the ball is going?" He would say, "In the hole." I would move about 6 feet from the hole and know that the ball was going to come very close to my feet, which it often did. His comment was always of disbelief. One time, when it really meant something, Joe and I were partners in the member tournament at the Jackson Country Club. I then would not let him line up the putts incorrectly, and we ended up winning. Joe was not what one would consider a drinker of alcoholic beverages, usually one beer, but not more than 2. One evening, we, along with 3 other couples, were at a dinner party. Upon our arrival at the dinner party, fine wine was being served, not beer. Joe eventually took a liking to the fine wine, and as we were seated for dinner, the wine changed from white to red wine. Just before the finish of the entrees, Joe's head went face first into his plate. Not to be awakened, he was a load getting back into his house. Joe was many times clueless to what time it was, where his personal belongings were, Stephen, and had absolutely no sense of direction. But he would always have a smile and laugh at his own misgivings. Once Joe asked for driving directions from Jackson to Somerset Mall in Troy, Michigan, as he had never been there. About 4 hours after we had given him the directions, I received a phone call from Joe, and he said, "Jean, I don't know what happened, but we are in Windsor." Joe was a master at performing various dog barks. We could be having dinner in a nice restaurant, a drink in a nice watering hole, and the server say something that we considered funny, and while walking away, the dog barks would be heard. The most memorable of the dog barks occurred on our visit to the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, sitting in the lobby, and as people would come in and out, they were greeted with a never-seen but very much heard dog bark. Joe was a leader of misplacing car keys, airline tickets, and sunglasses. Losing car keys to a rental car on a trip to Cedar Point resulted in Joe having to secure a stretch limo for the ride back to Jackson. Joe and I were fortunate to probably have played 15 to 20 rounds of golf at Pebble Beach, something we both enjoyed tremendously. Having food in your golf cart unattended is a big no there, not because it's not allowed, but because the birds of prey will attack us, as Joe found out. Joe could not believe it when his turkey sandwich disappeared in front of his own eyes. On one of our rounds, the famous par 3, 7th hole was before us. I hit the almost perfect shot, one turn of the ball from being considered a hole-in-one. That was not good enough for Joe. Joe went and purchased the framed picture of that hole and presented it to me, the gesture of a friend and a gentleman. Later that evening at a restaurant in Carmel, the newly crowned championship driver from the Indy Car Racing League was present, as we had attended the race. Joe, not aware of who it was, said to him, "Not a bad race, how did you do?" The response was handled well. The driver turned and walked away. I then informed Joe who it was, and he was embarrassed, which would then call for a dog bark. My memories of Joe will always be of the great and funny times we had together, enjoying golf, fine dining, and spending time with our families. His charismatic personality, and always with a smile on his face, Chelsea, to you, Stephen and David, always know that your dad loved you and carry that with you the rest of your lives. When you go forth in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead, he will always be with you. God bless Joe and you, his children, your friends, Deb Ross, Carly, and Jean Haskett. Thank you all for being here today.
Significant memories that have a lifetime of caring and love. It's indicative, certainly, of a man recognized in our community as a 1992 Jackson County finalist for the Citizen of the Year in our county. So many other memories. Would someone else like to continue with another story or please?
I don't need this microphone, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm John, Joe's friend. We go way back. And there's a lot of stories. I can give you a Tink report first. Tink was adopted to a very loving home in the Villages and is doing well. So I say condolences to the family. That's not enough. You know, it's words. They don't do it here. They just don't do it. So I choose to do what the African American churches do. And this is a celebration of life, right? This is a life well lived, right? Ups and downs, in and outs, all those things. And I was with them for a lot of them. In life, we have a thing called commonality. And commonality is an interesting thing, right? It can bring us together or it can divide us, right? Joe and I had commonality. We were guys from another city and ended up in Jackson. We were fathers. We had businesses in this town. And we had major setbacks. So what Joe and I said is that commonality is going to make us strong. We're going to always be there for each other. Never forget that. That's a strength that is incredible. His passions were too. Significantly, the children in the family. All the time telling me, hey, you know, Chelsea's this, Stephen's this, David's this, you know, everything's, you know, they're just great. I'm so excited. You know, and he'd go, how's Colleen and Tracy doing? My sons, right? Always had that. So anytime, day or night, if we needed a pep talk or something, there's Joe and there was John. So then there was Michigan football. Oh my God, don't get me started. Don't get me started on the maize and the blue. I'll wait for a second on that. I may be here a few minutes, I'm sorry. So Joe goes down to the Villages, and I'm working on my way to Fort Myers because my two oldest sons are down there. So Joe gets the Villages, and I don't know if you know the Villages. It is a very odd community, but being kind here. So Joe is in the Villages, and I'm old enough to have friends from high school that are in the Villages, so I introduced Joe to my friends. He introduced me to his friends, and his friends are my friends are his friends, right? Some of them were really, they're out there, but you know, it was a nice run. So his two good friends, Brad and Karen, are having a memorial in the Villages right now for Joe, and again, they express their condolences. So the Villages run is over. Joe wants to go to Orlando, so he goes to the Samoan Men's and Women's Health Clinic and works with Dr. Ken and AJ, great people, and has really a good time there, doing exactly what he wants to do, building his business. Now, I've now migrated down half a year to Naples, and he's in Orlando, so we got a 3-hour drive. So Joe comes down to see me. First thing we do, besides talking about the kids, is find a friendly sports bar to watch Michigan football. That is a very important thing. We found the Brass Tap, guy there, Michigan guy. You walk in, Michigan flags everywhere. So I introduced Joe. And Joe's, you know, very friendly. He knows everybody. So today, Dan and Brian and Crystal and Amber and Reggie are having a memorial for Joe. We have the Joe flag now at the Brass Tap. It's the Wolverine with the hat on and that little gritty look, and that's the Joe flag. So a couple weeks ago, we're at the Maryland game at the Brass Tap, and I'm introducing Joe to more people. And the game starts, and I'm talking to Dan, and I hear this, go, go, go. And I look around, I goes, Josh Jackson's running for a touchdown, the opening kickoff, right? So Joe's like, he's just totally engaged. He's all fired up. So Dan goes to me, says, John, he goes, is he always like that? I go, well, they think I'm wound up tight. When it comes to Michigan football, I mean, he is totally into it. So for some reason, I never could figure this out, and I never will, But we are in Naples, Florida, and the game is in Maryland, right? We got some water. Do you want some water? So we're at the Brass Tap. Michigan's playing Maryland, and it's got to be 2,000 miles between the two cities. But for some reason, Joe thinks that yelling at the refs is going to have an effect on him. And we had done that a lot. And most of the things that we said were pleasant. They weren't that bad. They were good. But the two passions, again, the commonality that brought us together were the family, the kids, and the extended family, and anything with a winged helmet on it. So I'm going to, we never talked about it with Joe. We talked about a lot of things. We never said, well, what would we say in a situation like this? Because you just don't think about that, right? But I'm going to go out on a limb, and I have done that many times in my life. I mean, I'll go way out on a limb because I think I know what Joe would say. And I don't mean to offend anybody, and I will clean the language up. My language, not his. I never heard him swear. Well, maybe once or twice. It was only against Michigan State. It was only against them. So I'm going to tell you what I think he would want me to say. And again, I apologize if I offend you. And there are besides how much he loves his family, that is absolutely the very top of the list. But then somewhere underneath there is that place over in Ann Arbor. But Joe would say this. He would say, screw the Fighting Irish, screw Spartans, screw Ohio State especially, and go blue. Joe's not with us, but those memories will never fade. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Lasting legacy of memories. Wow, that's fantastic. There was a note received on the internet from the friends and neighbors of Pineland Villas as well, which speaks of that community. The fond memories of Joe from your friends at the Pineland Villas and the Villages, Florida. Rest easy, Joe. Everything is fine. Your wish has been granted. Significant message communicated here. Is there another who might like to tell a story or a memory? We want to invite you and encourage you to do that. You don't have to come up here necessarily. You can stand up where you are and just to share that memory if you'd like. There are so many, too. I'd read some of the thoughts that were expressed, and I think some of them are so valuable. And if there's someone who wants to say something, just raise your hand and let me know. But one individual from Clarkston wrote, I have a lot of fond memories of Joe during our high school days at Dearborn High and through the college years as well. He was always fun to be around and a great sense of humor. He consistently, you described, and I appreciated so much his passion for health and nutrition and wellness, including authorizing Oreo cookies as a health food. I really appreciate knowing that, too. Of course, his love of the ocean and of Florida and spending time with his family and friends. But it goes on in some of those other memories. One wrote, Joe was such a nice guy. We attended high school together and became good friends. One wrote, I remember him as a good neighbor to my grandparents, Bill and Bethel Baker, on Lake Leanne many years ago. Another, I knew Joe well, not only from the Jackson Wine U of M football games, but my mother was a patient of Dr. Mayo for 20 years, and she absolutely loved him. Dan Huntoon, who is well known in our community for his wonderful food. Joe was a good doctor and a great guy. He was also one of my favorite customers along the way. Kristen wrote, I know Dr. Mayo from his chiropractic practice in Michigan. My husband and I were patients of his for about 6 or 7 years until he retired. He was a very kind man, a very professional and caring man. Another family wrote, he was a kind and caring and compassionate doctor and took care of me for several years. And then these last two in particular, I thought, would speak well for all those who have shared in his journey. Your dad was very special to Aaron and I. He was a great mentor and was always concerned about me through all my battles. He was my friend, and I loved him very much. And then Norman Hine best concludes, I believe, Joe, you will be missed. All these different expressions of concern, compassion, sharing the journey, memories, the snapshots in the mind, all of these coming together as a part of that legacy of life. And I know that you have memories too. And it's not always easy to get up in front of other people and talk about them. I understand that. And so what I'd like on behalf of the family is to invite you to Cascades Manor House. And there to go, and you go for a very specific purpose. And you say, that's silly. I know why we're going. We're going to eat. Well, yeah, that's a kind of side benefit for going. But here's the real reason you go. You go to tell a story. A story that begins, I remember when my father would. Do you remember the time that Dad would? And then there was a time that Grampy would. And then there was that time that he, I will never forget how he would. And then there was that time when and then there was that other time when the stories I mean here. The kind of stories I'm talking about. I don't talk about those moments perhaps that would get written up and described in a testimony of life. I'm talking about those personal snapshot moments that speak of the significance of the legacy of his life that has been lived and shared with you. Because those memories become the lasting reason with which we invest ourselves. And again, it's not in the number of years we live, although we find it so frustrating and discouraging when a young man passes. But we begin also to understand it's not in the number of years in which we live that we find our meaning in our journey of life, but in the living in the amount of time that we have, of investing ourselves with the most important of all, and that is creating the memories with other people that they can say without any hesitation that I am so thankful that Dr. Joseph Mayo has lived and been a part of my life. I'm so thankful that he has shared in the journey and has created in me the memories that will continue to be the stories I tell and continue to tell each day as we continue to live. Tell the story. Certainly tell the stories to the family. But beyond that, tell the stories to people you meet. I remember when Joe Mayo would, and it made a difference for me. And what greater gift do we have to give to anyone than the gift of ourself? Several years ago, I read about a large granite boulder that is in Yosemite National Park. On this boulder, there is a silver plaque, and on the plaque, there is emblazoned the figure of a face of a man. And on that, there is an inscription that gives the name of the man, Stephen Tangmather, and his birth and death dates. And it says of him, he laid the foundation of the National Park Service, defining and establishing policies under which its areas shall be developed and conserved unimpaired for future generations. There will never come an end to the good he has done. Let me modify that slightly for this very significant moment. Dr. Joseph Alfred Mayo, Jr., born November 19, 1954, died November 17, 2019. He laid the foundation with his family and with his friends, defining and establishing policies under which its areas shall be developed and conserved unimpaired for future generations. And then these words, there will never come an end to the good he has done. Let's together pray. Our eternal God, we thank you for the gift of memories. For in those memories are enshrined the life of Dr. Joseph Mayo, Jr., his investment and love of life, his love of his children and grandchildren, his desire to share in the journey with friends and family, and significantly his passionate heart of caring that even you, as the great and loving shepherd, personify in the fact of caring for people, ministering to their needs, adjusting to be able to help them be better. Father, both those who have gathered here as well as the countless of thousands of others who have been a part of the journey of his life, we pray that the memories will continue to have lasting and significant meaning in giving thanks that he has lived. Until then, continue to minister and encourage those memories as the stories are told, as we give thanks through Jesus Christ. Amen. And now go with God. Be encouraged by his tender and loving hand, bearing witness to all. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
At this time, folks, this concludes the service here at the chapel. Like Michael said, you're all invited to Cascade Manor House immediately following. If we could dismiss from this chapel first, you can pass by Joe if you wish to do so, family. Then you can exit right through the center aisle here. Just come right ahead if you wish to do that. If not, you can go right out the side door there. And then following this chapel, folks, we'll dismiss you over here around the East Chapel, and we'll have you come right up the middle, and you can go right out through the center aisle. Thank you.